Folk Tales. Cinderella. Once upon a time, there lived a poor man, and he had a daughter. Next door there lived a widow who had 2 daughters. The widow wanted the man to marry her, so she sent word to him that if he married her, she would treat his daughter like her own. The poor man thought very hard for a long time and finally made up his mind to marry the widow. The stepmother always treated her stepdaughter like dirt and never went out of her way to cause her sorrow and pain. When Sunday came, the widow and her 2 daughters prepared to go to church. The stepmother said to Cinderella, "Here, while we're away at church, pick out the peas from the ashes, cook them, and serve them." The stepmother and her 2 daughters went off to church, and Cinderella was left behind. And she was about to begin to pick the peas out of the ashes when a flock of doves flew in through the window. They dropped 3 nuts and set about separating the peas from the ashes. The 3 nuts were sent by Cinderella's mother. While the doves were picking out the peas, God descended and ordered the girl to go to church, but to leave when the priest raised the sacraments. Cinderella donned the silver dress and had a look at her reflection in the well before she left. When she saw herself, she was so pleased with what she saw that she almost fell into the well. The service was attended by the prince too. As soon as he caught a glimpse of Cinderella, his heart was captured. He couldn't take his eyes off her. But when the priest raised the sacraments, Cinderella left the church. The prince followed her right away, but the girl vanished into thin air and the prince could see no trace of her anywhere. Back at home, the girl took off her dress. The food was ready because God had prepared it for her. The stepmother came home with her 2 daughters. "You'll never guess what we saw at church. There's no one as beautiful as that girl in the whole wide world." Then they told her what they had seen. "I saw it too." "How come?" "From the mulberry tree." That was all the stepmother needed. She immediately had the mulberry tree cut down. The next Sunday, she mixed the lentils into the ashes and ordered Cinderella to separate the lentils from the ashes, then to cook them and serve them. The 3 women left her alone again. Then God descended with his angels and ordered them to do Cinderella's chores. He told the girl to get ready and do the same as she had done the Sunday before. This time Cinderella donned the golden dress. As she was setting off, she looked in the well and was enchanted by what she saw there. The prince was already expecting her. When the priest raised the sacraments, Cinderella left the mass. She vanished into thin air again. When Cinderella arrived home again, all the food was ready because God had prepared it all. "You'll never believe what we saw. I saw it too, from the top of the well." The stepmother had it cut down at once. The 3rd Sunday, the stepmother mixed flour into the ashes for Cinderella to separate. It was God again that did the job for her, and Cinderella donned the diamond dress and went off to Mass. But not without looking in the well first. She couldn't believe her eyes, she was so dazzling. When the priest raised the sacraments, she got up to leave. But the prince had had the threshold of the church covered in glue, so one of her shoes got stuck. The prince picked up the shoe and set off on horseback to look for its owner. At home, the stepmother's 2 daughters were again boasting of what they had seen. Again, Cinderella told them that she had seen it from the roof of the house. Upon that, the mother had the roof of the house demolished. The prince went through the whole village. He had all the young maidens in every house try on the shoe, but it did not fit any of them. When he reached the stepmother's house, Cinderella was made to hide under the washtub while they waited for the prince. The girls tried on the shoe, but it did not fit either of them, despite their mother having carved bits off their ankles. Then all of a sudden the cockerel began to crow in the yard. "The pretty girl is under the washtub! The pretty girl is under the washtub!" The stepmother heard this and began to chase the cockerel, but the prince heard it too. The pretty girl was indeed under the washtub. She tried on the shoe, which fitted her perfectly. Then the prince said to Cinderella, "Love of my life, I'm yours and you're mine forever and a day." This time it was the stepmother's two daughters who were left behind. And this is the end of my tale. Hungarian Folk Tales. 7 at one blow. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there lived a tanner. Now this tanner had as many children as a sieve has holes, and even more. One day he was cooking porridge for his children. There was just enough for each to have a drop. It was hot, it was summertime, and a swarm of flies flew in through the window. And this sent the tanner into such a rage that he lifted his hand and brought it down hard on the table. He managed to get 7 of the flies at one and the same time. So he thought to himself, "Am I not a true and gallant knight to hit 7 at one blow?" He made for himself a sign, and on it he wrote, "7 at one blow," and this he wore around his neck. Off he went to seek his way in the world, and eventually he came upon a well deep in the forest. So he lay himself down and slept. Just then came devils to sup from the water. One of these devils saw him and said, "Now this is a true and gallant knight. He's not a man to battle with." No sooner had he said this than the tanner woke up, and then the devil said, "Will you not come and serve us true? Your job will be to carry water in this bison skin." With that they went off to where the devils lived, in the infernal fire or somewhere deep in hell. And the devils drank the water up in a flash. So then the king of the devils said, "What wages do you require?" "A load of gold carried home, and I will ride on top of it." And so the bargain was struck. They passed the man the bison skin. The poor man almost collapsed under the weight of it. He set out for the well. He wondered how he was going to be able to carry it back full when he could hardly manage to carry it when it was empty. So he got hold of a spade, and when he arrived, he started to dig around the well. Now the devils got fed up of waiting for him to come back with the water, so one of them upped and went off after him. Said the devil, "What are you doing, tanner? I'm not going to come here back and forth and fetch water for you all the time. I'm going to bring the whole well in one go." "No, don't do that. You see, my mother is blind and she's going to fall into the hole. I'll fetch the water for you. You fetch wood from the forest instead." And with this, they started off back. Then the devil led him to the forest, to show him how much wood he had to gather up and bring back. The devil took the top of a tree and bent it down, and the tanner held on to it. Then the branch came loose from the devil's hand, and as the tree sprang back, it threw the tanner up and over the forest. Out sprang a rabbit from under the bush, and the tanner chased it. Asked the devil, "Now where are you running?" "After this rabbit, don't you see? I jumped across the forest for it, and I still couldn't catch it." Then the devil ran home and told the others, "Get rid of this tanner, because he's a bigger devil than any of us." The tanner said he wouldn't go away because there was a devil here stronger than him, and he pointed at one of the devils, saying he was the stronger one. And the devil said, "I'm stronger than you. Come with me to the top of the hill. We'll take a whip with us and make it crack. Whoever makes the whip crack louder is surely the stronger of us too." The tanner said, "I don't mind, but give me a club as well." When they got there, the devil said, "You go first at cracking the whip." "And no," said the tanner, "you go first." The devil took the whip and cracked it so hard that the tanner went and fell over. "I wanted to hold the end of the whip, but you were too fast for me." "Now then," said the devil, "it's really your go." "Well, if it's my go, close your eyes, because when I do it, you'll go blind." The devil closed his eyes, and the tanner smacked him right on the head with a club. Then he asked, "Now who can crack the whip harder?" And the devil said, "You can crack it harder. You're a bigger devil than all of us." So they went back, and the devil said to the rest of them, "Take this tanner home right away." So they put the money into a big tub, and he sat on top of it. When he got home, his children came out and said, "Father, Father, how long is it since we last had the meat of a devil?" The devil emptied the tub, money, tanner and all, and ran off back to hell. "It's a good thing that we got rid of him," he told the other devils. "Even his children want to eat the meat of a devil." And that was the full of the story, from its head all the way to its tail. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Magic Lock. Once upon a time, long ago and far away, there lived a poor woman, and she had one son. One day she had to do the washing for someone, and when she got home, she found the place empty. Where could her son have gone? Where could he be? No one could tell her. If only she had known that devils had taken him away. They had carried him off to hell to set him to work for them. When the boy had spent 7 years with them, they assigned him 7 rooms. He had to do everything: sweep them, clean them, dust them up, anything and everything he had to do. Now in the 7th room there was a lock, a magic lock, and in that lock lived 12 devils. He worked and worked on that lock until he eventually stole it. He escaped from those devils and went straight off home to his mother. Now what did he say to his mother? He said, "Mother, go to the king and ask him for his daughter's hand, for I would like to take her as my wife." Off went his mother to the king and asked for his daughter as a bride for her son. The king roared with laughter at the idea of such a lad wanting his daughter in marriage, so he said, "Listen, my dear, I'll give my daughter to your son if during the night he can root up and destroy the forest that surrounds the village. Make it disappear without a trace. That's the only way my daughter will ever be his bride." So the poor woman went home and told her son what the king had said. Well, all the son had to say was, "If that's all that's needed, that's how it will be." When evening fell, he turned the key in the lock, and right away there were 12 devils in front of him. "Off you go, level that forest by morning, so roots and all have gone and nothing remains, not even a fallen acorn." And the devils set to work. Next morning there wasn't a sign or trace of the forest, even the roots had all been pulled up. The lad went to the king to report the task was done, and he had come to claim his daughter. "You can have her if by morning there stands in the forest place a fine field of green corn." Now that was no bother to the lad at all. He had his magic lock which helped him to do it all, and by the morning in place of the forest there was a fine field of bright green corn. Again the lad went to the king and said, "Your Majesty, I have done what you asked." The king looked out and saw the fine corn, but all he said was, "Well indeed, you've done all your tasks. I'll give you one more. By morning lay out a road in front of my palace that is paved with diamonds, with trees at its sides and the trees full of birds. If you succeed in this task, then my daughter shall be yours." The lad went home and in the evening turned the key in the lock, and in the morning in front of the king's palace sparkled a diamond road with flowering trees and the trees full of birds. The king looked out and was almost blinded by the glittering brightness and the beauty of the trees. He couldn't believe his eyes. For that, it was worth giving his daughter's hand. And so it passed. On the following morning, there above the meadow hung a palace from a golden chain, and beautiful it was too. And that is where they lived. One day he went hunting, but he didn't take the lock with him and left it with his wife. She didn't know the value of the rusty old lock because her husband hadn't told her. Now the devils had a companion, and she was an ugly old witch. She happened to come by the palace, crying, "New locks for old! New locks for old!" The king's daughter heard her and was delighted, so she called out that she had one. Now that's just what the old witch wanted. Out she took from her pocket a new lock and exchanged it for the magic lock. Now the palace hanging from the golden chain immediately turned into a tumble-down old shack. The princess cried and cried, but she couldn't imagine how it had happened. When her husband came back, he almost fell over when he saw the tumble-down shack standing where his fine palace should be. His wife wept and told him how she had exchanged the lock for a new one from the old woman. Her husband was consumed by sorrow when he heard this. But he pulled himself together, went to the king, and told him the full and short of it. "Off you go to Mother Moon, who is all of 100 years old, and perhaps she will put things right." Off the lad went to see Mother Moon, who was all of 100 years old. But Mother Moon couldn't do anything about it. She just gave him a dog and sent him to Mother Sun, who was all of 200 years old. Off he went to her, but she just gave him a mouse and sent him on to Mother Wind, who was all of 300 years old. He told her why he had come, and she gave him a cat, and told him that there on an island in the middle of the deep blue sea lived an old witch, and it was she who had the lock. Wasn't he the happiest man there was? He did what he was told and went off to where Mother Wind told him to go. His way to the island wasn't easy, what with the mouse and the cat and the dog, but once they were there, it took the three animals no time at all to bring him the lock. When they got home, the young husband of the king's daughter turned the key in the lock, and straight away the palace was hanging there in its old place from a golden chain. The young pair were so happy. and they lived happily ever after.